Hi, thank you so much for joining me in the Louis File today. Today we're going to be looking in the Gospel of Matthew, a couple of places in Matthew, and we may get into a few verses in Hebrews. We just have to see how this plays out, but that's the plan. The video I made prior to this one, I don't know if you might run into these in order or not, but Jesus taught some hard things about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. And the Bible tells us that a lot of folks quit following him that day. They walked away, and he looked at his disciples and he said, "Do you want to go too? Do you want to leave also?" So he actually encouraged them to make a decision, make a choice. Are you with me or not? And Peter's response is, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of life." So the point meaning is that sometimes we might not understand, or might even be shocked, or maybe even have feelings of being hurt or something by what Jesus has shown us or what he's told us in the scripture, or maybe even what we feel like, with the Spirit of God in us is moving us to do. We just think, I do not want to do that. But, once we come to know Christ is the only one that has the words of life, then we make a decision and we go, you know what, I'm on your side. I don't care if I understand it, how difficult it gets, whatever, I'm with you. So I'm going to continue that thought today. And we're going to look at Matthew 10, verse 34 through 39. Let me just read those and let's see what happens. So Jesus speaking here says, "Do not think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I came to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies will be the members of his household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who has found his life will lose it, and he who has lost his life for my sake will find it." Oh my gosh. Talk about drawing a line in the sand. So Jesus is saying, look, I didn't come to bring peace. That in itself can rock you because you're thinking, well, I thought he's the Prince of Peace. I mean, he offered us peace in John, in the Gospel of John. He says, my peace I give unto you, not as the world gives. So what is it saying? Well, I think that when it comes to Jesus, everyone has to make a decision. Everyone has to make a move. We have to pick him or reject him. We can't just brush him off and not address him. He demands a response. And he says that he's going to set mother and father against each other, or a man against his father, and a daughter against his mother, and all that. So even right down to the family unit, he's going to cause division. Now, he's not going to cause division in a family that's all chosen him. Then we're all going to be on the same side. But, for instance, in some countries, I guess all countries, in some cultures or religious systems, when people come to Christ, they get baptized and they openly accept Christ, receive Christ, bow down to Christ, pledge allegiance to Christ, however you want to say it. When they do that, they are at the same time rejecting and denying their religious system, which sometimes, most times, is really tangled up and one with their culture and their family values and even sometimes their government. So when you receive Christ and you get baptized, I'm not trying to lay heavy on the baptized thing, but the baptism, being dunked in water, making this public display of your declaration that you have been crucified, buried, and raised with Christ, that is saying that the old you, everything about you, the old you, is gone. 2 Corinthians, Paul told us, he said, you know what? He said, if any man is in Christ, he's a new creature. All old things are passed away. Behold, all things have become new. So everything about who and what you were has been crucified and buried and left there dead. So it could cause, and it might cause, and it does cause this type of upheaval and division. In some countries, in some cultures, you accept Christ, and then you're written out of the will. You have no inheritance, and they don't even acknowledge you as their child, or maybe father, depending on your status in that particular situation. It might even be worse than that, and it could be that you are killed. You could have your head cut off. You could be imprisoned. You could just be ostracized from the community and the family. It's a pretty heavy price tag to follow Christ. In the Jewish people, it was not any different. The people that had not come to Christ yet, but the Jewish people that, like Jesus was addressing a lot of times, to reject Moses or to say I'm no longer involved with the temple practices and the Levitical priesthood and all the animal sacrifice, turning your back on all that is like you're dead to me. So Jesus says, look, that's what I came to do. I came to get people on my side or against me, and that's it. But even your own household might be your enemy. In verse 37, he says, he who loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. Your allegiance to Jesus Christ, who he is, has got to be more than just your family or cultural affection or love. And I know that sounds pretty amazing, that anybody could demand your affection, love, and loyalty above your own mother. But I think that in the context here, what he's saying is that if your mother is not on my side, then you're going to be at odds with even your own mother, the one who raised you, cared for you, and protected you, and got you this far in life. He's saying you're not even worthy of me if you put her above me. Now, the interesting thing about this is that my wife would tell you that since I became born again and my affection is now on Christ, she says, I know that Louis loves Christ more than me, but she said, but when he does that, when he is engaged in loving Christ first and foremost, she said, then it feels like and it seems like he loves me the most. And I think the point is that, it's like when I put my affections on Christ and I am one with him, then he who is love, this God who is love, that love, that God who is love now inhabits me and can't help but pour out to others. So it's the love of God in me that by which I'm loving my wife. So there is a loyalty in one sense, you could say. I'm loving Christ first, if you want to put it that way, but he loved me first. I love him in response, and then this love I have for him and him for me is poured out to those around. So, and then in Matthew 10:38 and 39, he says, and he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. Now, there's a lot of thoughts I have about this verse. Some people will say, well, see, it says here, Louis, that you have to take your cross. In other words, you have to die to self. I don't know if that's really what he's saying. I think that you have to die to all of your other loyalties. You have to be willing to push all your chips toward the center and say, I'm with Jesus Christ no matter what it cost. No matter what it cost. In another place, Jesus even said, you have to count the cost. So we have to do that. It could also, I think there's another aspect of this, that Jesus has not gone to his cross yet, right? So he's saying, pick up your cross. He's saying, come with me into my death. It could be that, couldn't it? It could be that he's saying, join me in my death, burial, and resurrection. And then you'll actually really find your life. Because that's what he's saying in 39. He who has found his life will lose it. Another translation, another gospel, I think maybe, it says that if you seek to save your life, you will lose it. But if you lose it for my sake and for the gospel's, then you'll keep it forever. So there is a so-called independent life that has to be crucified and has to go to the cross. That life of making yourself first and deciding things in your life apart from Christ as though you can do that. That life has to go to the cross. That life has to go away. That life you have to be willing to lose. All of your props, all of the things, even to the point of your own literal family, has to be let go of. And when you do that, when you lose that life, you will actually discover and find the real life, who is Christ himself. So let's look ahead now in Matthew 25. A lot more verses here, but I do want to read this because I think that Jesus in so many ways consistently told us that we have to choose. We have to pick him above all others. We have to agree with him, which means that it's going to put us at odds with the world. Matthew 25, 31 through 46. Just bear with me here if you will. Let's read these verses. Matthew 25, 31 through 46. Jesus speaking again says, "But when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. And all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them from one another, as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep on his right and the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me.' Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? And when did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?' The king will answer and say to them, 'Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me.' Then he will also say to those on his left, 'Depart from me, accursed ones, into the eternal fire, which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me.' Then they themselves also will answer, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not care for you?' Then you will answer them, 'Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did it not. You did not do it to me.' These will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." So here's another division. All right, so the Son of Man comes back in his glory, Matthew 25, 31, and the angels with him. He'll sit on his throne, and all the nations will be gathered before him. This would be the Gentiles. The Bible talks about there's Israel and then there's the nations. So there's one aspect of this whole thing that you can say that Jesus is going to sit on his throne, and all the nations, in other words, not Israel, but the nations of the world, the Gentiles, are going to be brought before him, and they're going to be judged based on how they treated what Jesus calls these brothers of his. Verse 40, to one of these brothers of mine. All right, so on one level, I think it could be saying that the Gentile nations will be judged according to how they interacted, treated, or mistreated Israel, the Hebrew people, Jesus' literal brothers. Way back in Genesis chapter 12, when God promised Abram that he was going to make his name great, and he's going to make this great nation out of him, he said the whole world, or all nations, would be blessed by him. And he says, whoever blesses you, I'll bless, and whoever curses you will be cursed. So God used Abram and that relationship, that promise he gave to Abraham, as a barometer on how the rest of the world was going to be looked at or dealt with by God himself. I mean, it's quite remarkable. It simply just says it right there. So if the nations or the rest of the world treats Abram well and blesses him, then God will bless him. If they treat him poorly and they curse him, then they're going to be cursed. So God's favor, it seems, in this kind of way, revolves around the treatment of Israel, or the Hebrew people, the people that are the descendants of Abram. Now that is a natural descendancy in one sense. Now you could also translate or move that over into the new covenant age, and you could say in principle it could be talking about Christians. So Jesus would say, the way you treated my brothers, in other words, those who are with me, those that are Christians, then that's going to be the basis. So the way I've kind of looked at these verses, really until, but right before making this video, I didn't really think of it as in terms of Israel and the Gentiles, but that is what he's saying. But I've tended to just look at it as people in general, and I go, I'm going to go share the gospel, the truth of Jesus Christ, with people in prison, and I'm going to go to rehabs, and I'm going to go, if the opportunity opens itself, I'm going to go to nursing homes. I'm going to, if I have to go to the hospital to talk to someone or get to, then I'm going to do that. So if I got to go to some shut-in's house, it doesn't really matter to me who they are. If they're hungry, thirsty, naked, in prison, sick, whatever. I'm going to attempt, if I'm led and able, to take care of them in a compassionate kind of way. Now, the thing that really gets me, and the one thing I normally focus on in this, is how Jesus said, Matthew 25:40, the king will answer and say to them, truly I say to you that to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me. So whatever you might think about who the brothers are, whether they're Hebrew people, the people of Israel, or they're just people in general, or whatever you think about that, there's one thing about this that is the same no matter what, and Jesus is totally 100% identifying himself with those people that are hungry and sick and imprisoned and naked and homeless and in trouble. He's saying, whatever you did to them, you did to me. And I like to tell people, he doesn't seem to be saying, he's not saying, whatever you did to them, it's like you did it to me. He said, whatever you did to them, you did to me. He is totally identifying himself as those people. In Acts chapter 9, we see the story of Saul persecuting the early church, Saul who became later the Apostle Paul, and Jesus confronts him on the road and during his conversion story, and he goes, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And Saul's like, who are you? He didn't know who he is. And he says, the one you're persecuting. I'm Jesus Christ, you're persecuting me. Now, if you think about that, Jesus had gone to the cross, been buried, raised back, and now he's the resurrected Lord talking to this Saul, but he's identifying himself with the followers that Saul is trying to kill. So Jesus is saying, why are you persecuting me? So when Christians are being persecuted, Jesus takes it very personally. And he says that they're persecuting me. Oh my gosh. So when we feed, or give water, or visit, or comfort somebody that is Jesus' brother, whether you see it as a Jewish person or whether you see it as a Christian, I think both could be kind of similar. And he's saying, you're doing it to me. Or, in the last part of what I read, you're not doing it for me. Man, if we could just see that, if we could start to see our fellow believers as Christ, if we could start to see that when we're treating or mistreating them, we're actually doing it to Christ, that will change everything. Now, do I do that all the time? No, not at all. It's so easy to walk by these eyes and to start battling flesh and blood, even though, the Apostle Paul told us in Ephesians 6, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. So we have to learn how to see through. We have to recognize even the Christians that don't seem to be acting like we think they ought to act. If they're claiming to be a Christian and there's significant evidence that they have Christ in them, then I have to treat them as though they're Christ. Oh my gosh, if I could just do that. If I could just do that. So there's going to be a division. Jesus said to follow him, you got to pick up your cross, and the members of your household might even be your enemies. And here he's saying that he's going to return at some point, and all the nations are going to be brought, and they're going to be like sheep nations that treated my people well, and goat nations that didn't. So I don't know about you, but I see this in our world a lot. At the moment of this taping of this video, our world is definitely taking sides based on Israel and or Palestine, Israel and or Hamas, and we got to get on one side or the other. We're all going to have to be picking a side at some point. And it's going to all come back down to what we did with Christ. All right, so let me show you one more place. We are going to get to it in Hebrews chapter 12. This is the appropriate way of ending this. Hebrews 12, 25 through 29. So toward the end, this is the end, basically the end of the Hebrews letter. And look what he says, Hebrews 12, 25 through 29. See to it that you do not refuse him who is speaking. That's a good point. For if those did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, much less will we escape who turn away from him who warns from heaven. And his voice shook the earth then, but now he has promised, saying, Yet once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heaven. This expression, yet once more, denotes the removing of those things which can be shaken, as of created things, so that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we receive a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us show gratitude by which we may offer to God an acceptable service with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. Wow. So there's always shake-ups and shakedowns. Hebrews is saying there's going to be one at some point that's going to shake everything that can be shaken in heaven and on earth. So the temporary material things that we have relied on, things that we've trusted, things that we've worshipped possibly, things that we love inappropriately that are temporary will be shaken, and that is the greatest thing to happen, because then it's going to show us what is unshakable. And he says, it's amazing because he says, Hebrews 12:28, therefore since we receive a kingdom which cannot be shaken. That's what I'm talking about. I don't care what it looks like or feels like or sounds like. I don't care what everybody's shouting at you about. If it's God's kingdom and he's established it, it can't be shaken. That's where I want to put my feet. You know, Jesus told this story, I think it's in Matthew 7, I'm not sure about that, but he said, those who heard these words of mine and put them into practice are like a person who built their house on a stone, on rock. When the storm comes, the foundation is good. It withstands it. Another group, those that heard his words, and didn't do them, are like someone that built on a foundation of sand, and when the storm came, it blew it away. So we all hear the truth. At some point, we all hear the words of Jesus, the truth, and some of us hear it and don't walk in it, don't live it out, don't do it, and that makes us, that gives us a very shaky life, a very unsteady, unstable foundation. So when the stuff hits the fan, when the consuming fire comes, when the tornado, when the trial, test, temptation, persecution, whatever, when all this stuff comes at you, you're going to be shook and you're going to be blown away. But those of us that hear the word, that's what it says here. He says, Hebrews 12:25, see to it that you do not refuse him who is speaking. Don't reject what Jesus Christ, what God himself is saying to you today. Choose him over your own family. Treat the Hebrew people and the Christian people, just cover all your bases. Treat all these people, treat everybody as though they're Christ. Even the ones that you don't have any reason to think they're Christ. You love your enemies is what Jesus said. You love them anyway. The whole idea with that is that there's the potential that Christ could be in them. You love them. You take care of them. You're gentle. You're not quick to fight back and strike back. But all that can be shaken will be shaken, so that only what can't be shaken is what will remain. I would say that a big portion of the book of Revelation is showing us that. You know, we have pestilence and boils and judgments and earthquakes and hail and war. And, I mean, you got all this stuff going on. You're thinking, oh my gosh, where are you, Lord? Why is this happening? It's so horrible. Why would he do this? Well, I think it's the shakedown. It is the shakedown. Jesus told Peter that Satan desired to sift him as wheat, but he had prayed for him that his faith would hold up. And then when he turned back, when he got himself back together, strengthen the brethren. So we all go through individual storms that shake us from time to time, but it shows us where the foundation is, what's solid. It teaches us where we can stand. And then we have we're going to have global shakedown that's coming, according to the book of Revelation, and right here in Hebrews. The shakedown is going to be unbearable if you don't have Christ to stand on. All right, thank you for joining me today. I hope this has helped you, and I will see you on the next Louis File.